Welcome to Modern Latin America in 15 minutes. My name is Dr. Kim Richardson, and today we're going to briefly discuss what's known as the Porfiriato in Mexico. Porfirio Diaz was a dictator from 1876 to 1911. There's a 4-year span in which he was not that we will discuss right now. Now, what this is hopefully you remember from last time. Porfirio Diaz, well, not from last time, but previous lectures, Porfirio Diaz became famous as one of the commanders in the famous Battle of Puebla, in which the Cinco de Mayo is celebrated every year. He was a general, a leading supporter of Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez during the Second French Invasion, during all of these things that are going on. Well, Benito Juarez decides he wants to run for president again. President Diaz, let me say that again. Benito Juarez says he wants to run for president again. Two people come out of the woodwork to oppose him. And their issue is, listen, you've already been president more than once. You cannot be president again. Benito Juarez ran for president anyway. And as such, Porfirio Diaz decided to rise up in rebellion against Benito Juarez. He's very upset that Juarez is running for president again. Juarez defeats Diaz not only in the election, of course, but in particular on the field of battle. Diaz put his tail between his legs and went back to his plantation, and Juarez became the president. Lerdo Tejada was placated because he was put in as the Supreme Justice, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which means that if anything were to happen to Juarez, then Lerdo Tejada could become the next president. Inevitably, Juarez is going to die, and then Lerdo de Tejada temporarily takes over, and then, Juarez was really old by this point. Lerdo de Tejada takes over, and then is elected in his own right. So he gets to be the president then. The Lerdo presidency. What he wants to do as president is take over and do the things that his predecessor did. And that is especially build railroads, have a rural police force, and have education. In other words, order and progress. Those twin pursuits that we talked about of positivism in this case. So, of course, he's accredited by completing, by 1872, this railroad from Veracruz all the way to Mexico City. And then in 1876, he runs for president again. Now, if the issue was re-election before, it's still going to be re-election. He's running for president again against Porfirio Diaz. Diaz rises up in rebellion against Lerdo de Tejada in a plan known as the Plan of Tuxtepec. This time, Lerdo de Tejada was defeated and Diaz came to power as the president/dictator of Mexico. So 1876, Diaz finally comes to power on the platform of no re-election. By now, Mexico has been independent for roughly 55 years and has had 75 presidents or monarchs or interim presidents. He's going to provide a piece of stability. That's why it's oftentimes known as the Pax Porfiriato. He rules for 4 years and then he steps down because he came to power on the issue of no re-election. And this guy, Manuel Gonzalez, gets to be president in his stead. But afterwards, in 1884, President Porfirio Diaz comes back to power, and then he's going to stay in power as long as he can. He is going to be re-elected, I know, on the platform of no re-election, 1884, 88, 92, 96, 1900, 1906, and 1910. Why is the president, though, the Pax Porfiriato, the Porfirian peace? He does do a lot of great things. He builds parks, insane asylums, all sorts of great things that looks awesome. But if you think about it, one of the problems with this is that it demonstrated growth of the economy of Mexico, but it did not demonstrate development. Development is different than growth. Development means you're going to have the ability to pull yourselves up by your own bootstraps and make more money. Growth means immediate growth in the income. Many countries have tremendous growth. That means overall, the bottom line, they're making more money, but the people are starving to death. It's better to have development, people that are making themselves more money rather than the country as a whole having growth. Well, in order to focus on growth, economic growth, he hired a bunch of people called Científicos. The Científicos is not an exact translation, but it means in Spanish a scientist or those scientifically oriented. They were a circle of technocratic advisors to the President of Mexico, steeped in the positivist scientific politics. That means order and progress. They function as part of his program of modernization at the start of the 20th century. Okay, there we go. So we got positivists coming to power, and they're called científicos. And they're going to focus on growth as opposed to economic development. They want the country to make more money, not the people to make more money. One of the key figures here is José Ives Limantour, who is going to be perhaps the most famous of all of the científicos, these positivists here. By practicing positivism, then, they have order plus progress equals what? Equals a made-it country. The twin pursuits of order and progress means you are a positivistic country. You can show the world that you are modern. And modern is that term that people want so badly. They don't want to be backwards. They want to be modern. Yet the question is, modern at the expense of whom? So what does it mean to be positivist? What do you need to do? The first thing you need to focus on is building railroads. So as we saw already before this point, right, Juarez and Lerdo de Tejada, they begin railroad building. But it's going to be under Diaz that the big building of railroad will now take place. So in 1880, there's really not a heck of a whole lot of railroads being built. But by 1900, holy moly, there are a lot of railroads. But notice something about these railroads. They go north to south. Nogales, Ciudad Juarez, Piedras Negras, those are key ports, right? There's one right here, teeny tiny one right here that's really for the United States. But there's not a lot of east-west traffic or linking the cities together. In other words, as you can see here, it's going to be a neo-colonial dependency of the United States. Export, yes. For the United States, yes. So not really politically and economically independent. What are you going to put on those railroads that are going to go to the United States? Well, how about minerals? So the minerals are going to be put on the railroads, but oftentimes the mines are going to be owned by foreigners, Americans. Remember, one of the key aspects of neocolonialism is foreign domination, foreign control of these resources. And so in this particular case, this is Colonel William Greene purchased this mining company and made it more productive in Sonora, the town of Cananea, Sonora, and he produced a ton, literally more than a ton, of copper, and he exported it to the United States. Whenever there were strikes, of course, in a couple of very infamous incidents, extremely infamous incidents, then he's going to bring in strike breakers, or in this particular case, he's going to bring in Arizona Rangers and have them help to crush this uprising in his copper mine. But the point is going to be that with the combination of railroads and mineral operations, the economy is going to grow, and that is what he wants. Gold increases from 1.5 to 40 million pesos during his presidency or dictatorship. Silver, 24.8 to 85 million pesos. So the economy is indeed growing. And one of the good things about export products is that the government can tax it very good. Whereas if you have a mom and pop that's living in the countryside growing their own food, very difficult to tax their own food, but you can tax exports. One of the third thing that comes later on in the presidency of Porfirio Diaz is going to be the production of oil. Oil is later going to be even more vital to 20th century concerns, absolutely, as we know in the 21st century. Especially in Tampico. This is a modern map. It's the same area, of course, as this period of early 20th century, but you can see still the deep sea exploration, this great oil and gas concerns. It becomes very important for the export economy of Mexico. Again, that's neocolonialism. Whenever you depend on one thing, monoculture, then you're going to have problems. Order and progress. That's what we want. That's called positivism. In order to say we have progress, we got railroads and export and economic growth, but we also need to stimulate investment by having peace in the countryside, order. So he expands the rural police force. Now, recent histories have come out stating that the rural police force was never as extensive or as brutal as previously thought. That could be true, but it was still brutal, just not as brutal. In fact, one of the key laws that they have is called the ley fuga. If you were doing something they didn't like, they would turn you around and shoot you in the back and say, well, that person was running away, so I was forced to shoot him. All right? So they're scared. You're scared of the rural police force, but they're keeping order to stimulate foreign investment to increase progress, and that's what you really want. The problem comes with land. Land is one of these big problems that we talked about previously. The Land Law of 1883 meant that you're going to survey the lands in order to build the railroads, right? And all the lands, the survey companies, they got to keep a third of the land. Then those that build the railroads, they get to keep another third of the land. Well, it behooves the surveyors to say that all the land is public. So the ejidos, which are land that the villages own in common, right? They say, well, that's public land. So now we're going to survey it and declare it part of the government. And then the government gives us a third of it. Or let's say that you've had a piece of land in your family for generations. Well, now they say, well, I'm sorry, but you don't have the title to that land. I don't care if you've had it for generations. Now it's public land. So then they get a third of it. Well, what do they do with all this land? Either the land companies, the survey lands, or the railroad companies. They sell them. They could keep them themselves, but oftentimes they sell them to rich landowners. And they create what's called haciendas, big plantations. It's part of the latifundia system that we talked about under the section of neocolonialism. Latifundia. So the person that used to live on the land gets to stay on the land, but now they're going to be a peon. They're going to be a worker or a wage laborer for the hacendado. More times than not, they're going to be linked in by debt. They're going to say, I'll loan you some money to get started, and then you come to the company's store and you buy your goods. So you work all month, you come and get your money, and you receive a ticket or a coupon. And you say, what is this? Well, it is your salary for the month. Well, what can I do with it? You can go to the company store called the Tienda de Raya, and you could redeem it. So you go to the company store and you find that they have upped the price, and so you can't afford enough food. So they say, don't worry about it. I will loan you. I'll give you an advance, give you some more money. Great. Okay, fine. So they do that, and then the next month it's the same problem. Then the next month it's the same problem. Then the next month, then the next month. Then pretty soon you find yourself more and more in debt. Why is that a problem? Because when you die, your children inherit your debt. And then your grandchildren, and then your great-grandchildren. The system here makes it so that the rural people in Mexico are suffering more and more. They're getting poorer. But on paper, Mexico looks to be super rich. Here is a great Los Angeles Tribune cartoon. The debt peons here, you can see this, and the land barons, land monopoly. And the question is, what is the matter with Mexico? Land maldistribution. These guys are linked together with debt peonage. They're tied to the land, and the landowners control everything they do. Okay, so you can imagine right here, this right here is a system in which people can only deal with so long, right? Economic growth as opposed to economic development. The people are getting poorer and poorer, whereas the country gets richer and richer. The United States, as a neocolonial power, say, Porfirio Diaz is a great person. Yes, he is, if you have invested in Mexico and you live in the United States. However, if you live in Mexico, you're saying, oh my goodness, I used to be able to survive. Now I can't even buy enough food to feed myself. That is it between economic growth and economic development. This is Porfirio Diaz, right? The fact that he was a dictator for all these many years, from 1876 to 1911, is less important than the fact that the people in Mexico get poorer and poorer, and they can only let themselves get so poor and so malnourished before they rise up in rebellion as a revolution. This is Modern Latin America in 15 minutes.